I like to get into like the psychology of why people are sort of like critical or trollish with successful people, or what kind of drives that behavior. But you got to be a little bit careful, I think, with how much you're sort of willing to understand the sort of troll mindset, because you can kind of fall into that cycle of thinking too. I think if you try to you definitely want to be somewhat compassionate and go like, I'm trying to understand maybe where this person is coming from, or why they're hurting, or they're feeling a certain way, and maybe what they're projecting. But then after a while, you just sort of have to go like, okay, there's no helping these people. Like, some people are just going
Yeah,
to be negative no matter what.
it's the same thing as bullies in real life. Like usually bullies have another bully, like have like a bully themselves. So they need to like, or they're like very insecure and they're like afraid of people like targeting them. So they rather just do it first. It's like, I'm sure there's a psychology to it, but you're right. You're right. You just have to let people be and keep going and not think too much about it.
Yeah, I had a very good mentor early in my adult life who was like something like, 70%, or what is it, like 20% of what 20% of your life is what happens to you. The other 80% is how you let it affect you. And so I think that's good advice. And the more you sort of like live by that, I think the happier you are, particularly the more exposure you get to people. And, the more you're sort of in the public eye, the more you're going to be, um, susceptible to that. Like, you're going to be exposed to it whether you want it or not. And you have a great experience with that recently.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yep.
What has that been like for you? I mean, obviously, I think the first big one was Little America, right? Which you won an award for. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What
Thank
was
you.
that like?
You know what? I personally haven't seen any bad comment from Little America. So it hasn't been like, if I don't know, maybe I'm just like too much in my bubble where I don't get to see those.
Yeah.
Um, and so far, I think before Sneakerheads, I think that I had a pretty like a small amount of followers. So most of them still felt seen by me. And I think that they didn't allow themselves to like really say bad things to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that as my followers grow bigger and bigger, I think that people feel a little bit more anonymous and they might feel a little bit more okay with saying how they feel. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm still kind of like getting used to it. I haven't had too much hate yet, but all my life I had bullies or like people that wanted to like make me feel bad all my life, ever since I was really little. So I think I definitely became very tough and like had a tough skin like
Was
as
that
I
was
grew up.
was that part of your upbringing? Do you feel like you were raised tough?
I think that, yeah, and I think I because of girls who just like felt, I don't know, if intimidated or just like, oh, she thinks she's better than, because I always had this big personality and I always like was always very like ha 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 blah blah blah, in my like little bubble, and I think that people don't necessarily like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand it. It's a lot sometimes. I
I
get
get
it.
it.
I get it.
Yeah, I get it.
Like if when you're a teenager and you're just kind of like in that phase of like hating life, and you have a classmate who's like, "Ooh, life is good." I'm sure that I'm an easy target, but I think that it did help me become tougher and just kind of like more, I don't care. People will be whatever they want to be, and whatever other people do just shouldn't affect me. Like that's their problem at the end of the day. Or
That's a
that's how I saw it.
Yeah, that's a healthy mindset to have when it comes to that sort of thing. I think, and the other thing is like, I think there's probably no greater evil in the world. This is very dramatic for me to say it like this, but than to make somebody feel bad for being themselves. Like, uh, and that sounds like anybody who's like a fan of mine who hears that is like, that's like very progressive for Jock, but it's not even that. It's sort of like, it's what you talk about, like when you're just sort of being yourself and you're being sort of this bright and open person, regardless of what shape that takes on. For other people to make you feel like you should feel bad about that, I think it's super evil because of how often it works. Like, so often there are these like really great, beautiful personalities of young people who they sort of like, they feel that at a young age, and then they stop being themselves, more and more each day because of the way that the reaction makes them feel. And it takes a very tough, brave person to sort of filter that out and to keep being themselves, through all of that. And it's very sad to me when you see it work, and that's why it's sad, is because it does work on so many people. It gets so many people to be less themselves every day. And it's not even like just people in the public eye. It's like, the
In
creative kid.
general, in
Yeah, it's
general,
like the
yeah.
creative kid in high school who was made to feel weird, or, and it's not just like the sexy stories that Hollywood loves to tell, is when that takes the shape of like a gay kid who was bullied and couldn't feel himself, or, a person of color who was bullied and doesn't feel themselves. But like, it happens to everybody, and everybody, that is a universal thing that I think we can all relate to, is that everybody sort of at some point was told that who they were in some way wasn't okay or liked by other people. And then they're forced to make a choice of, do I keep being myself in spite of that feedback, or do I change a little bit? And that decision to change a little bit is where I think we all start to die a little bit and lose what makes us all so unique and special.
Yeah, I definitely think that it happens in society. Once you sign the contract of being part of this society, it feels like you have to be like follow the rules and become whatever everyone else is doing. But at the end of the day, like I learned pretty young, I learned that because of that, because I had always someone was gonna say something. So I kind of always felt seen because of that, because people wanted to point out something that I was doing. And so in a way it kind of, I had that, it was a mindset, because at that point you have to really just have a mindset of like, well, people are going to hate me regardless, or they're going to love me regardless, so I might as well be me.
Yeah.
So it just kind of like, I guess I had just that flip of like, well, people are going to say whatever they're going to say for, or whatever, like they're just going to keep talking. So I guess I made that decision, but I don't think that a lot of people see it that way. And if you're weak-minded, unfortunately it can really torn you apart. And I think that's why I in a way I want people to see me and just say, hey, I'm weird too, and like it's okay to be weird. Like I really love whatever weird is. I think that people are just more exciting and more interesting if they are not the usual. But that's just me being like a nerdy kid, who loved art and like loves creativity. So I
Well,
don't know.
that's
That's just what I think.
no, I think that's great. And like, I think, I think there needs to be more of a more daring sort of mentality from people in society to be that way. It's like, because that's where all the interesting stuff comes out of. Like, I've had this, it's not really like a conspiracy theory, but I've had a theory about the shift that's happening in Hollywood in the industry right now, which is, for the longest time, it was like the prettiest, or the people that seemed the most perfect, or the people that seemed to have everything, or the people who seemed the most put together. And now I think it's pivoting to where success is being awarded to those who are truly the most authentic. I think we've seen the pretty and the perfect and the facade for long enough now that viewers are like, I want the real person. And so I think, the more people get to either do roles that they can express themselves in, or the more that they get to be part of projects, or the more that they do press or whatever, where people can really connect with who someone actually is, the people who come off as the most authentic, the most real, or the most relatable, which has always been a really important thing for comedians, but I think it's becoming important for everyone in the public eye now, is that people have to be able to see themselves in you. They have to be able to relate to you in some way. And so being this sort of perfect, untouchable person in the industry is not as appealing today as I think somebody who comes off as authentic and themselves, even if they're a little weird or whatever, because I think everyone holds out hope that their weird thing is what makes them interesting too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I'm seeing that more and more. I think that like the fact that, so like I think it happens because of social media too, where like you feel like you can actually connect with another person. And like before, I think that people were just like these untouchable celebrities.
Right. There
and
was
and
there was this huge wall between them and the public.
right, and they were these like big screen, big stars. And I think now it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, I think you're
It's
right.
really not.
I think you're right in that. I think that because that veil has been lifted a little bit, people are like, okay, well, now that I know that these are just regular people, then I expect them to be like me or to behave like me in a regular way. And so, that's why I
I mean,
think,
and we are like at the end of the day, like we're all human. Like
yeah.
before, they were all human, and they were all like they all had these. I think the cool thing is that I feel for a little bit of time, and I think I can say like maybe the last 30 years, because by the Betty Davis era or like those like black and white films, yes, they always cared about being beautiful, but I think that there was people cared more about the art, and then there was a moment like maybe until now, hopefully, where like everyone that we saw on TV were like models and like very attractive, good looking, like 100 out of 10, like type of people. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that now hopefully we're shifting and going back to the art. And
Well, with this face, I have to hope you're right.
shut up. No, I hope so too. It's like I personally think that beauty, or whatever beauty is, it's a very it can be a temporary thing, or it can be a very, we're all going to be old one day.
Yes.
And I think that people have put so much emphasis in like their looks and forgotten about really becoming a good person, and like someone that actually like me, like someone that like actually, like, I don't know, like a good person, like someone that's actually interesting.
Yeah, well, and I think
And
you want, like, I think we all ultimately deep down want people to like us for what we like in ourselves.
yeah,
And so, if you don't really know what that is, it's hard for other people to be attracted to it or like it as well. And so you kind of have to find that thing about yourself that makes you unique or special, or makes you that you like about you, and then
yeah,
share that with other people and hope that they like it too. I mean, that it
absolutely. And
sounds
I
like
think
an oversimplification, but
and beauty is completely relative, and it's completely relative. Like
yeah.
whatever is beautiful to you might not be beautiful to me. So it's like that's also another thing. Like Hollywood for so many years thought that being like whatever, like a
Well, look at
blonde,
how it's changed. I mean,
blue-eyed
in the
white woman was more beautiful than a black woman for so
yeah,
long. And that's not true. That's not true. That's just whatever they thought. And so
right.
I think that I think that also Hollywood has a responsibility to seeing all types and shapes and skin colors as equally beautiful, because they are not the ones to determine that. It's the
Well,
world and the audience.
I also think you have to consider that people can still be surprised too. Cause like, I'll give you a personal example. I remember growing up as a kid and thinking like, oh, this is what I'm attracted to. And then you meet somebody that is completely not that. And you go like, I'm more attracted to this person. And so you kind of like grow and develop. And eventually over time, like I'm pretty old, I'm 37. And eventually over
So
time, you realize like, yeah, I'm ancient. It's a Hollywood 60. No, but eventually you get to a point where like, oh, there's really not, I don't really have a type. It's really more like I like the package, meaning like it's not just how someone looks, but it's their personality, it's their vibe, it's everything else that kind of comes in that package. And I think, Hollywood has to do that for its own survival, because, you know, the if you're not showing all the possible packages, then you're not speaking any truth to reality. And the reality is now we live in a world where beauty and that spark comes in so many flavors and so many varieties that you would be doing yourself and your art a disservice if you didn't go find those people. Like, and you don't just want to find the sparky white people or black people or Latin people. You want to find them all, right? And
yeah,
my girlfriend being Middle Eastern is often the forgotten group there, because it's like, as all of these other groups start to get more representation and more stories, she'll still get breakdowns that are like, we're looking for terrorist number 5. And she's like, okay, like at some point,
ugh,
she's
we're
like,
so
it's
tired
some,
of those stories.
I know. And so that was one of the things that was really cool about Little America is, first we watched your episode because you won an award for it. And that's the one that everyone said is the best. And then we watched the Iranian episode, which was one of the first pieces of television that, and of course I loved, I I think it's called Here and Now, that Alan Ball did for HBO, only for one season, but it was an incredible show
I haven't
with
seen it.
Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter's in it.
I'll
The
check it
guy
out.
from the guy from Shawshank. What's his name? Tim. Why am I forgetting his name? Tim Robbins is in
Yeah.
it. And then a bunch of like young actors, and then Peter McDisey, which is actually, I think, Alan Ball's. I don't know if they're married, if that's his husband, or if it's just his significant other. But he basically plays sort of like a conservative Iranian who is sort of rebelling against traditional Islam. And so there's like this huge compelling argument or compelling character conflict, internal conflict there. But it was like, I thought it was one of the best shows on HBO, and it just didn't get picked up for a second season. And there's so many shows like that that are like incredibly great shows, and they just don't really find their audience out of the gate.
And I think that also certain shows take time to find their audience, and like by
Yeah.
canceling a show in their first season is like, I don't agree with that. I think that a lot of, especially with so much content right now, canceling something that you haven't even allowed people to find, it's like, or they don't give that much marketing. There's so many layers to that. But
Well, I
think
mean, a good example is Breaking Bad. That show almost didn't survive, and a lot of people now think it's one of the greatest of all time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you have, it's, I think that that's a beautiful metaphor to just like, you know, you have to allow people and allow shows to grow and develop, and you know, and then eventually you're gonna like might love them and see where they're going, you know. And Little America was one of those shows that just right off the bat, I mean, and Little America, even Little America, which is an amazing show, and it's not just because I'm in it, but it's actually
Right.
something that I'm very proud of as an audience, as an immigrant, as a part of the show. I'm just like, wow, like this is something that's so different and so needed, and it's an art form of a show, but a lot of people don't know about it.
Well, the thing I loved about Little America, and you talked about this in another interview you did one time, but you were like, I can't believe this show is controversial. And it was sort of controversial before it ever came out because of the subject matter that it prepared to tackle, right? Which was sort of like eye-opening immigration stories. And I think maybe the reason some of it got an eye roll in the beginning is because every time people have said that they're going to do that kind of story, it ends up being sort of a stereotypical story, right? And then you watch Little America and you go, oh no, these are the stories I want to see. These stories of like excellence and overcoming and willpower. And to me, that is the thing that I think gets too reduced in the discussion of immigration when we talk about in the political sphere and so in society in America. Is like everyone talks about immigration as like this black and white thing of, you know, well, you're either a citizen or you're not a citizen, and there's not this sort of myriad of story that happens from one point to the next. And I love your episode because of the story, and it's just like, wow, you know, this is a family who literally has almost nothing and is still like fighting and you know, committing to something. And I think the story was like great in terms of like personal discipline and a commitment to personal excellence, and saying that like your environment doesn't have to dictate the outcome. Those
Amen.
are
That's
those are
so,
messages that every person should hear. Like those are the stories you should be telling.
I agree. That whole show is, it's just very beautifully written, and like, and that's what we want to tell, you know, as just humans in general. We want to tell stories that inspire other people, and that immigrants are not always, they're not victims.
Right. Not, yeah, that's,
They're,
you said the key word there. I love that, is that they're not. Yeah, I feel like there's so much of weaponization of immigration that like every immigrant is a victim. And it's like there are these incredible immigrant stories. And that's what really like tugged at my heartstrings watching Little America, was like, these are the immigrant stories that don't get told enough, are the champions and the people who overcome. And, you know, to me as an American who was born here, that motivates me to be like, what the fuck am I doing with the opportunity that I got living here that
that's
other people would
beautiful.
kill for, right?
That's beautiful, because I think, you know, and I have a lot of conversations with all like I love just having all these type of conversations that are like controversial or not. I think that
Yeah,
we all have to have it. It's
yeah,
part of evolving as humans, and it might be uh uncomfortable for some, but they're very needed in order to grow. And you know I just think that people sometimes don't realize about the blessings of being American,
of course.
and like and it's not like no one is taking an opportunity from you. No, opportunities are there, and you just have to have the mentality of like, I'm gonna work for that, and I'm just gonna believe that I can do it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your race, your age, anything. It's a mentality thing.
Yeah, and that was actually kind of what I loved about the Iranian story on Little America about the father buying. He's sort of like this career hustler who is always trying to find the next angle, right? Which, if you know Persian people, that's very much a cultural thing of like, what is my advantage to this? And they're
Yes.
always sort of like setting
Hard
the table.
workers, right?
Yes, well, and very problem solving in terms of like the mindset, right? And so he's like, I'm gonna buy this piece of land for next to nothing, and then I'm gonna find a way to make it work and turn a profit. And the thing I love about that story is that
I love that
he
story.
loses. It doesn't work out, but he just moves on to the next thing. And so to me, it's like this great that was this just great story of resilience of like, if you stay committed to yourself and committed to your family and you keep working hard at it, you might fail 100 times before you win. But, it's about having the right mindset all the way through it. And I loved what they showed in terms of like his relationship with his family and how much he supported his son, wanting to be a musician. And, I just felt like those are the stories. It's like it's not really like this exceptional grand story, but I thought it was really cool that they told it anyway because
It's
the
even
the mindset is exceptional.
exactly. And I think that sometimes we've been seeing all these Avenger films that we love because they are those grandeur and like hero
I'm glad
stories. But
I'm glad you brought up the Avengers because I have a hypothesis and I want to ask you about this, but we'll get to that in a second.
ooh, okay. So, but yeah, we watch all these stories because they do inspire us, and I love that we can watch them and be so inspired by them because yeah, they tell a beautiful story, but also we are heroes. And having like these, what I love about Little America is that it showed immigrants, but any human, because it really just like portrays
It's a human story.
a
Yeah.
human story, uh, in their little small bubble, like persevering and like in their own dream and in their own and in the world we see every person has a story like that. Every single person has a story of perseverance and wanting to do something and following a dream, whether it's huge or small. And I think that's why it was so important to tell that story, that it's not about the winning and it's not about you know finding that success, but the process of that and the keep going and keep moving forward. Those are
Well, I have said for the longest time that it's amazing when you watch actresses and actors, and you'll see them in something that is like they're okay in, and then you see them in something that they're amazing in. And the person I think that doesn't often get the credit for that is the director, because I feel like for that perfect storm to happen, and your episode, The Jaguar, was 100% that perfect storm where I felt like you wouldn't have been able to nail that part if you didn't connect with the story on some level. And I feel like you probably, just based on the execution, I don't know any of the backstory, you probably had a director that also was really able to connect with the story to where you're all putting yourself into it and it becomes this new thing, which is this story that you're all telling together based on a shared experience.
Yep, exactly. And Aurora, which is she's a woman, a Latina woman. Her name is Aurora Guerrero, and she is an amazing director. Like I think that woman is gonna become one of the A-lister directors.
Mm-hmm.
And she really did connect with the story. But also she's a brain, she's a genius. And I agree with that because I think that my best work is always with a good director, with an amazing director, and someone that can really guide me. And
Well,
and
and
that's
is willing
we're
to,
a tool at the end of the day. We're a tool,
yeah.
and if we have the right captain, we're gonna do wonderful things.
and they have to be willing to pull it out of you. Like I had, you know, again, it's a whole different world, but hosting your own sort of like reality travel log show, the
Mhm.
difference between a director who's willing to push you for that extra hour a day versus the person who's like, we got it, let's get out of here,
Yep.
is the difference between episodes that sucked and episodes that were incredible or fun or great that did really well. And so it, as the story becomes so much more important to that, I think the acting and everything else is so reliant on people being invested in getting it right and doing the story justice. Like I just watched the movie Swallow last night with
Mhm.
Haley Bennett. Did you see that?
I haven't no.
Yeah, so there was like this there's you should watch it. There's a scene at the end where she's sort of confronting the thing that put her on her path in life of
Mhm.
being in a very unhappy place, and she's I don't want to spoil it for you, but she's
Okay.
face to face with the thing that led to all of her trauma. And Haley in that moment does better acting in that scene than probably 95% of the Academy Award winners for the last 20 years. And it's like
Wow.
there's obviously a talent component there, but to me
Wow.
it's like so much of that had to be the director being like, we're not leaving until this feels real, until this is 100% of the way there. And this is the payoff for this film. And if it doesn't land, then the film falls flat. And it's like the power, the emotional ability, and the fortitude to reach into another human being and pull that out of them is so mind-blowing to me. And when you see it, even if it's like an inspiring story like the one you did for Little America, it's like it's hard not to get choked up because you're like, oh my God, this person is channeling into this thing that I've felt, and I remember how it made me feel, and you're seeing that emotion represented on the screen. And that's the thing that I think people relate to. Forget about like the color or the ethnicity of the story or any of that. It's like you said, you're getting to it on a very human level, and you're using all the darkness and the anger, and you're pulling all of that out. And the thing I thought was like that was cool about the way you played that character was I think you played it in a way where the relatable piece is that even like people who are kind of like smooth and have it together have some anger inside them about certain things. And I thought you played that so well in that she came off as like angry, but wanting a place to direct it and wanting to find a way to channel it into something positive and productive, not somebody whose anger necessarily devolved into being destructive, which are often the stories that are told, right? And so I thought it was really cool to see that sort of that push of, you know, a young person who could have went either way in their life and then found this thing. And your relationship with your coach in the show was great. Like it's so many things. It's like if the casting doesn't come together, if the talent isn't there, if the director isn't there, it takes this real perfect storm.
Yeah.
But boy, do I absolutely love the finished result when it all comes together like that.
Yeah, we were really lucky. I mean, and it it's a testament to having a great director, to having a wonderful director, someone that had the vision, and
Now
you know,
let's talk
instead of
about the bad directors. Go. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
I wish I could talk about those, but those we keep in private.
Yeah, of course. That's the behind the scenes, right?
Those we never talk about. I wish we
Yeah.
could. Maybe in like 50 years, you know, whenever you don't care anymore.
Yeah, once
But
that
no,
person's long left the business, then you can
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of yeah.
But no, that's funny. I think that it's crazy because even during the process, you know, I think even with Marisol, I brought whatever I thought was her, and then having a partner like my director and her vision, and then finding that together, I think that's really where the magic happens,
Mhm.
working together. And that's why, you know, film is what it is, because it takes a lot of different elements. And of course the casting, like, I don't know how we got so lucky, but even through that process, the days are crazy, and you don't know if, you don't know how it's going to end. So
Yeah.
seeing the final product, it's like, ooh, wow, like that's what I was trying to do. But wow, like
Yeah.
I'm glad that it all became that, you know,
Well,
become that.
even and so much even happens in the editing. Like I always tell people, the first two short films I made, I edited myself, and I was like, "Oh, nobody should be allowed to call themselves a director until they spend 100 hours editing something, because you have no idea what you're actually looking at until you try to cut a film together." And I mean, and you've made shorts too, so you have some perspective on this as well, right? Like
Oh yeah,
it's
the
it
editing can make or break the project.
absolutely, like you could shoot something that looks beautiful, and if it doesn't cut together, you don't have a movie
You don't. You
or a
don't.
film, or a short or
Every
whatever.
single time I meet the editor of whatever project I do, I'm like, thank you for making me look good.
Right.
Thank you. Because even when I'm on my set here, this is like where I do self tapes all the time. And one of my frustrations sometimes is like I love the first part of it, and then at the end I mess something up. And I'm like, like if I could only like edit it together, because like
Right.
I want this, but I didn't like the last part. I wish I could have ended it like this. But you can't. In auditions, you can't do that. And which is not real, because then you get, when you are actually making a film, you get to edit it together. And so no, editing, I think it's where the magic really happens.
Yeah. Well, and to me, that's the difference between something that's like that really, really hits and lands, or something that just doesn't really work. Is, how does the edit come together? And and yeah, and I think it's like, it sounds very reductive or simple, but it's like you have to get it first when you're shooting. Like if you don't actually get the great thing,
Yeah.
then you didn't get it, and you got to move on, and you're never going to have it, because you don't really get to go short of, those sort of major Avenger movies where you can go back and do $100 million reshoots if you have to. You're
Right.
never going to get the opportunity to go back and do it. And so it's like creating the moment, capturing the moment, and then, being able to cut the moment together in a story. It's all those things have to fall into place. And I'm amazed at how, at still seeing it get done, because of how much the business has sort of pivoted to cheap, quick, easy, digestible content, right? Where it's like, people would rather come up with a reality show and throw two guys with, C300s out in the field, and a dude holding a boom, and try to capture something that's going to sell a lot of advertising that way, versus actually creating a compelling story. And the one thing that's really scary about right now with all the streaming and everything else is now that it's almost like the box office has become reserved for these big budget productions, where this amazing, all the movies I liked were growing up were like independent films, like the film that nobody knew about, that was made for a cheap budget, and that just told a good story. And those are the movies that are desperately threatened right now in the state of filmmaking today. And that's scary to me as a fan of those things, because that's where I feel like the stars are born.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think those
Like
sometimes get lost.
Jennifer Lawrence never becomes the star of Hunger Games without Winter's Bone, and that movie probably wouldn't have gotten made today.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think people are, I think people are still trying. I think it's just harder. It's really hard to be seen by these markets. I mean, Netflix is kind of opening that for indie filmmakers.
Yeah, definitely.
I hope Amazon and Hulu keeps going, and all these other but I think even now, look, I have my film Raise Your Hand. It's a movie that I did about 5 years ago. Wow, 5 years, no, 4 years ago. 4 years ago. And it's one of the films that I really just, it was when I was just starting to. So when people see it, they're gonna see Jearnest like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was a film that it was so low budget, and everyone was just pouring their heart to this film, and we were all starting, and it was just this like kind of like kids kind of film, like kids,
Oh yeah.
or those type of films that are very indie.
That was
And
the first that was like the first really gritty indie film that got me, because I was probably, when that came out, I was maybe 11 or 12. And I remember seeing that movie and being like, oh shit, there's these kinds of movies I didn't even know existed. Like that was the first movie where I was like, oh, there's like gratuitous drug use with teenagers. Like it opened my eyes up to a culture that I hadn't been exposed to yet. It was because I was too young. It wasn't because I lived in a part of the country that was isolated from it. I grew
Well,
up in
and because it wasn't
Philadelphia,
a
so
blockbuster back then,
right,
I
yeah,
think so. And then, so Raise Your Hand. It's kind of that film that when I, when I read the script back then, it was like Sandra Bland, which is one of the Black Lives Matter. Like, she's a victim of that. Or she was a victim of that. Now people know her name more, but back then in 2016, she had just died by it was police brutality.
yeah.
And
For people that don't know that are watching, Sandra Bland was the woman who was arrested, detained in a vehicle, and didn't survive to the station. Like, was literally murdered in the police van or whatever on the
she was
way.
murdered, I think, in what is it? Prison is one thing, and then jail is another one, right?
Right. She was on her way to, yeah. I don't even think she had made it to jail. I think she hadn't even been intaken yet.
No, it was
Yeah.
like she was staying overnight, and then apparently she committed suicide.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many.
So many of those.
And listen, like, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum or whatever, I don't think anybody disagrees that our police need a pretty big overhauling in terms of like oversight and making sure that you can't even really stop at police because it's all of government. We've got to come up with a system to where we're rooting out corruption and getting rid of it across all government, because where I live in California, it doesn't stop with the police. Unfortunately, it's all of it. It's all gross. And it all stinks.
And at the end of the day, we have to realize that we have power. And I think that hopefully people have realized that 2020 is that year of like, hey, if we come together, we can actually change things.
Well, you got to remind these people that they work for us. Like, and if they don't work for us, they don't get to keep working for us. Exactly. And it's kind of like, I have this big issue with that side of the industry, is that like sometimes agents and managers, if you have bad ones, they forget who they work for, and they'll start talking to you like you're an employee and not a partner. And and so I feel like government has kind of fallen into that same thing where the people that you collaborate with or are supposed to be working with your best interest in mind forget.
I think they think that they're a monarchy, and we have to show them that it's a democracy. And I think, like, they've been treating the government as a monarchy, and like almost as because they're rich, they should have that position. It's not like that. But talking about Raise Your Hand, my film, it's been 4 years, right? And no one was really interested in distributing it, or at least it wasn't. They didn't think. I don't really know the background of that, but finally we got this new film festival. I think it's called, and I'm sorry that I don't know it, it just happened yesterday, but it's a social justice film festival that came out with Michael B. Jordan being one of the heads or the founders of it. Mm-hmm. And the film is finally going to see the light because of that, because now there's film festivals that are now targeting or want to showcase these films. Yeah. But going back to what we were talking about, sometimes these indies just get to the film festival and then it's really hard to get distribution after. Because they're not marketable.
Well, and a good example too is like the thing I love is, and I'll be totally honest and transparent about this. Growing up, the narrative around the Central Park Five, I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in that time. The narrative around that was nowhere near the reality of what happened. And so you kind of grew up thinking like there's this sort of like criminal element of New York that needs to be dealt with. And, there's a lot of these rapes and murders. And, this is just kind of more of that. And what Ava DuVernay did with that series, and particularly the kid who played Corey in that episode, like so powerful to see like the level of police manipulation, the level of stuff. And listen, what I said, it might be controversial about this, is that piece of film, that short series that Ava did about the Central Park Five, did more for bringing light to the corruption in police and sentencing and the problem with sentencing laws and the problem with DNA and all of those things than the last 30 years of activism. And I know activists aren't going to like to hear that, but like the Innocence Project needs pieces of content like what Ava did and maybe like the film you're talking about
I
to
agree.
shed light on those things to the people that otherwise aren't paying attention to they're not looking for those pieces of corruption. They're not looking for those stories.
You know, people were not ready. And when people watch Raise Your Hand, I just hope that they see, you know, what the type of film that it is, because people weren't ready to see that movie. Producers and distributors and all of those people that make decisions weren't ready for that film 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. They're ready now.
Right. Well,
They're
and in a lot of ways they have to be.
And they have to be, because this is what people are finally waking up, and we are changing and we're evolving and we're being just more conscious in general. And I think that that's where we're going. And I don't think that we are going to be able to, after this year, I don't think that people will be able to go back to the cave.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, going back to the cave. Well, and I think, you know, it's like there is what I think Ava did very, very well in that is like you have to get the people that don't feel like they're part of that problem bought in that there is a problem and that they could be a part of changing it. You know, like you watch that story and you just go like, well, yeah, I'm sure there's corrupt police, but like, what does that look like? Right. Because in a way, we had shows in the late 90s, early 2000s, like The Shield, that almost sort of glorified police corruption, right? It was sexy. It was this anti-hero thing. And you kind of thought like, well, the world is a fucked up place. And so for police to do their job, they have to be a little fucked up too. You start making these justifications. And then you see that story of like 13 and 14-year-old boys being coerced into basically giving their life away, threatened into giving their life away so that some fucking district attorney can keep her conviction record looking good. I mean, and that woman is literally going to go to the grave refusing to say that she did the wrong thing, which is like, that is a level of evil that I don't think people realize exists, is that self-righteousness is a dangerous, dangerous thing in our society. And there are people.
What? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Self-righteousness. So that woman literally would have let those 5 young black boys go to the death, like be sentenced to death to not be wrong. And that's terrifying shit to see that.
That's just like devil. That's like,
it is. It's the full like, evil. Like
she's devil. Like
that is evil personified.
Evil.
And that's evil. You know, and that kind of like, that is, I think, like the scary thing about that is that kind of evil doesn't always have the same face. Like it comes in so many different systems. It comes in so many places of power. You know, it's an easy narrative and it's kind of a lazy narrative to say that it's just a straight white or white male or whatever problem.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. I agree with that statement that you just said, because it's not black or white.
And it's really about people in positions of power. Like
people, position of power, and people, and just we have to treat everything as an individual thing.
Yes.
We have to judge people individually. Like we can judge all white males. We can't do that. We can't. And that's another thing. We can't target us. Like we need to be very cautious with how we do things. And we want change, but it's not about being against everyone that looks a certain way, because then we're just becoming this. We're not really evolving.
It just becomes a cycle, right? And you see, and we've seen this throughout history, particularly in Africa, where it's like you'll see one group of power, whether in the Middle East as well, you'll see one religious sect take power and then exterminate their opposition, and then that side will grow and eventually take power and exterminate their opposition. And so it's funny, like my cancel culture moment 2 years ago was saying something and being an aggressive comedian and hyperbolic in my statements, was saying something of like what you said of like, listen, the solution to racial inequality in this country is not picking a new whipping post. It's not picking a new group to hate. That's not the solution.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. It's about listening and like understanding. And like sometimes, yes, going back to the uncomfortable conversations, they are needed, because sometimes they just come from ignorance. Like you can't assume that, you know, and I was having this conversation with a white male who was not understanding a lot of things. And I was like, wow, like, you know, like it's a little bit shocking, but you know what? I was like, maybe he's having this conversation for the first time in his life.
Yeah,
And I have to give
exactly.
him a break, because we don't know it all. And we can't assume, like, there has to be some humility, like being humble about certain things and just like, hey, I don't know it all. And having that conversation and be like, you know what, you are ignorant to this, and thank you for asking, and thank you for allowing yourself to become vulnerable, that you don't know this, and sparking this conversation, because it's needed, whether it's comfortable or not. Like, we have to come together and really talk. And some people say, it's not my responsibility to teach people. Yeah, it kind of is.
Well, it's
Unfortunately, we have to teach other people and come together and try to understand each other.
Well, even from the perspective of like your personal relationships, it would be like saying it's not my responsibility to teach my potential boyfriend or wife how I want to be treated. And it's like, it's absolutely your responsibility, because you're the only one who can do it. And so, like, literally putting up those boundaries and saying, this is what I'm willing to accept. This is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to be viewed as a person. If you're not going to put up those boundaries and tell that story and fight that battle with people, who will? No one else is going to come in and go, this is what Jearnest deserves, because you're the one who knows what that is more than anybody else.
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, I agree with that. I think that we all have to come together and sit on the table and say, hey, what are you going to allow yourself to what are your standards,
right?
And how are you going to meet each other in the middle ground of that? And hopefully we are just smarter than before, and we can actually make a change for the better, where no race is being targeted.
Right. None.
Move forward, because then it's I see someone like you, for example, and it's not fair, and I have friends that are white that sometimes just feel like, hey, I'm not like that, and
yeah, well,
that's not fair either. So
well, and the tough thing for somebody, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The tough thing for somebody like me is like and I don't say this to say like, feel sorry for me, but the tough thing is like, my skin doesn't do the life I've lived any justice, because I've been somebody who's been exposed to so much culture and so many different things that most people that look like me have never experienced. And so my perspective comes from somebody who's lived through stuff that a lot of other people that I might look like have never seen or experienced. And to me, like, that's what makes human beings beautiful. As I always say, like, I think the difference between being able to persevere and being so cynical that you get wrapped up in it and become negative is you stop believing that human beings have the ability to surprise you. And the minute you lose hope in the fact that you might meet somebody that absolutely surprises you is the minute you start to kind of die a little bit inside and lose that thing that motivates you and keeps you pushing through the dark times in life. I love the idea. And part of the reason I love this format for this podcast is because my hope is always to bring people on and learn something about them that I wouldn't have expected or didn't see coming or had no idea about, because it allows you to be surprised by people. And we have to continue to be willing and brave enough to put ourselves in environments where we allow people to surprise us. And by having like reductive conversations of straight people only know this, or only gay people can speak on this, or only people of color can speak on this, it becomes so reductive, because then there's a guy like me who goes, well, as like a white guy who was told by his black girlfriend when he was 20 that he can't meet her family, like, I have a little bit of an understanding of what racism feels like. Like, that's a painful experience to go through, no matter which side of it you're on. So, it wasn't like I walked away from that experience going like, I'm still white, so fuck you guys. Like, I didn't feel that way. It didn't feel like a win.
We are human. At the end of the day, we are all human. And yes, you might not deal with certain types of racism, but we don't know what you've dealt with. You might be an orphan. You might be someone that suffered from other type of things. And I think it's just about empathy.
Yes.
Empathy. We have to just have empathy towards everyone and understanding. And like, really listening to each other, because it's not as simple as just black or white.
Yeah, and you can't really just it's sort of like the old don't judge a book by its cover thing. It's cliche, but we do that now maybe more than we ever have as a society, where we listen, like some people who check all the boxes of diversity are still fucking boring and don't have stories to tell. And then there are people who look boring, who might not seem like they have a story to tell, and then you listen to that person and you go, "Oh my God, this
and
is
you're
amazing."
like, wow, I did not expect that from
You know, like a good example I always use, I don't know if you watch like $1 Million Listing or you've ever seen that show, but
not enough to
yeah.
know much about it, but I feel like I know the concept of it.
But yeah, so one of the guys, he's like one of the most famous real estate agents in LA. He's a young gay guy named Josh Flagg, and he's sort of well known on the show for being the guy who knows like old Hollywood architecture the best. And so, but his grandmother was this amazing person. She like fled the Holocaust, like escaped the Holocaust, actually helped the Dutch like free Jews from concentration camps, like help the Dutch army free Jews from concentration camps, comes to America with like a few $100 in her pocket, recognizes that there's an opportunity to be an importer of polyester. She was like the woman who invented polyester fashion, basically, creates this mega fashion empire, right? And builds this whole new life for her family.
Wow.
And how easy would it be for somebody to walk past her sitting at a cafe in Beverly Hills before she passed away, because she passed away a few years ago. But how easy and reductive would it be for somebody to walk by and go, just another old Beverly Hills white bitch? You know what I mean? And it's like, this woman has lived this incredible story that if you just think that, you'll never find out. And so that's why I think storytelling.
It's a very individual thing. I've seen a lot of white people who have never had privilege,
right?
Like are poor, you know, like, so it's just,
and some of us are too stupid to use it when we do have it. I mean, some of us are
spectrums. There's all spectrums of things. Like there's immigrants that are very rich.
Yeah,
rich
for sure.
You know, so it's just, I think it's at the end of the day, like I think we can't simplify things.
Well, and I'm sure that, you know, that is part of that's also part of what makes us hate getting put into those stories, because I'm sure like there are moments where you're standing, you could be having a conversation with another person. You're from Puerto Rico, right? Mm-hmm, so another person from Puerto Rico, and they go, man, yeah, they just treat us like shit. And you're like, you're a millionaire. Like, you have always been a millionaire. We are not the same, even though two other people might look at us and think our stories are the same. Like, you know, don't try to take credit for my struggle.
Absolutely. And you know what? I do feel lucky and blessed that I was born in a place like Puerto Rico, where we were all Latinos. We were all Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
and so in that way, let me rephrase that, because I would have loved to grow up in a place that was like very multicultural. That's something that I do love about New York and LA and the United States. But what I'm saying about this living in an island, that we were all kind of the same, even though Puerto Ricans come in all colors. We come black, white, everything in between. Like we look like, you know, everything. And I think having the nationality part of like, we're all Puerto Rican no matter the race. And there's this saying here that they say, ¿Y tu abuela dónde está? Which means, where your grandma at? Yeah. So it's that saying of like, oh, you're criticizing me. Well, where your grandma at? You know, like your grandma might be black, you know? So it's that saying of like, we're all the same. And that made me in a way not feel like race was a big thing,
because culture and community were a bigger part of the interaction than race. And I think what we're finding is that so much of the division in America comes from the fact that we have sort of lost those small senses of culture and community, and social media plays a big part of that, right? Because back in the day, even when I was growing up, like your friends were from school or your neighborhood, and that was the extent of your social circle. Now I talk to people on the other side of the country more than I talk to the people that live right next door to me. And so it's easy to sort of band together over the things that make you alike and find division over the things that make you different, because you aren't governed by a sense of community. And
Right.
maybe, some of those things, you hate to have like an apocalyptic view of it, but it might take some sort of major, ELE, what we call like an extinction level event of a major earthquake, or this happened in 9/11. There needs to be some social thing that happens that makes us recreate that sense of community. And it
Right.
might be the death of technology.
Ooh, maybe.
That might be what has to happen.
That could happen.
Right.
That could happen. And also, interestingly enough, you mentioned 9/11, and what caused a sense of community there was
Tragedy.
also a common enemy.
Right. Yes, that's true. There was a common enemy born out of that.
So how can we get there without having a war or a common enemy, or this like nationalistic ideology that in a way it's more about pushing hate towards someone else.
Right. Well, that's the tough thing.
And that's where a lot of people find the nationalistic and that type of community by hating other people. And that's why you see all of that's happening right now. It's like, well, this is my sense of culture. And so it's about finding the American culture in the good things of, hey, community, and not looking alike, and everything in between. I think it's very complex, but I hope that we find a common ground, and we can see, the Persian, our Persian neighbor and our Chinese neighbor. And we are very lucky in LA. Not every place in the United States is like that, but that we can actually find a community in that too, and the differences. Because something that Little America did show was that.
Yeah, the sense of community.
A sense of community. And like, all of these stories, we are pretty similar. Bottom line, like our hearts, at the end of the day, we want the same things. We want to be happy. We are dreamers. We are,
we want purpose. Everyone wants they want to feel like they serve a purpose in society, whether that be big or small, depending on who you are.
Yeah.
Your sense of purpose might not need to be that grandiose. Like some people find their purpose in, running a small business, or find their purpose in being a nurse or a doctor. And, I've always said this, I'm envious of those people. I wish that I was somebody who could find purpose in something small and easy to do. And not saying that those things aren't important, but
easy, because becoming a doctor is really
it's not. Yeah, that's not. No, definitely not easy. But like, even like, here's a good one that's not divisive. A chef. I have tons of friends that are chefs, and that is their purpose, and they love it, and they live for it, and they work at a restaurant, and they make food, and there's like,
and
they have a beer at the end of the night, and like, life is good. And I'm like, fuck, I wish that finding purpose was that simple for me.
I wish I was a submissive woman who can just like have kids.
Right.
And like good for all types of women who find purpose in that. I just don't find purpose in that.
Right. That's not you.
Sometimes I just wish I could have a simpler life, but no, I just want to have big dreams and be rejected 200,000 times a year, Well,
one of the things I always love to talk about, obviously with the name of the podcast being The Darkest Hour, is the dark side of things. And that's what I thought would be interesting to get into with you about, because what I said earlier about this being the perfect timing is that you're entering a stage of your career where people are going to be less like, oh, I'm sure it was like talk about all the rejection, talk about all the hard things. Like, you'll start booking things that will sort of make people believe that there never was hardship or never was 200 plus rejections. I mean, I've never acted to that degree where I've had that many rejections. Like, acting is probably like the fourth or fifth thing down the line of what I've done or what I'll do. I'm more into stand up and writing and producing and that type of stuff. But but I've had a lot of no's. But being somebody who's constantly submitting for things and constantly being told no, it's like, how do you fight through that? I mean, what gets you through to that point? Is it a series of little things of like, okay, I got Little America and that got me going for a while, and then I do Sneakerheads and that'll carry me for a little bit, and then, I mean, how do you, I guess, talk a little bit about maybe when it was the darkest for you in that process and how you got through it?
I think, well, Good question. Because I think that
You're
it
like,
all
it's all
started.
been good. No dark times now.
No. I think it all starts from also before, even before that. I think in growing up in an island, not many people can survive from becoming actors.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like something that it's just not seen as a career.
Yeah, you guys have like J-Lo and that's it, right?
J Lo
She's
and
like,
she, J Lo and she's well. We have a lot of good people, but and talented people. But for example, J Lo is from the Bronx,
right.
so
She's
it's
not
just
from, yeah, she wasn't born and raised in Puerto Rico. She's,
exactly. So
yeah.
it's really hard to see people in the island, or yeah, just having like a good income.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like an impossible dream for a lot of people. And a lot of people kept telling me when I was growing up, I was like, every time people would ask me what I wanted to do, I was like, I want to be an actress in Hollywood. And every time I would say, I'm gonna be an actress in Hollywood. And a lot of people laughed and would say things like, well, okay, cool, haha, yeah, but like you need like another career. Like, okay, yeah, but like you should study law, you should do this, you should do that. And
Yeah.
so I think that's when it started kind of like I had to have a lot of like willpower.
Yeah.
And so then later, when I moved to LA, I think it was 2 years in, because, English is not my first language.
Yeah.
So having to learn to really master another language and learn all these lines. And, sometimes I got the auditions like a day before. So having to memorize all of this was really hard.
Especially with English as a second language, is because people don't realize, like, the tough thing about, unless you sort of immersively learn a language, two languages at the same time, you're always sort of translating in your head as you're reading and processing. And so it slows everything down.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes even now, like whenever someone changes a line for me on set, I have to like, okay, give me a second because I have to process it first. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think that people understand the struggle of that. But yeah, in the beginning, it was kind of like it was really rejection after rejection. It's like no, 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 and I think what started changing it for me was okay. Well, I'm gonna be a producer then, or I'm going to create content for myself then.
Yeah.
Because you're not giving it to me. So then, okay, then I'm going to have the power over my career, and I'm going to change, and I'm going to find my work, and I'm going to create content for myself. So that's when I started kind of like shifting the mindset of like, I think actors, unfortunately, we are one of those people, we have the unfortunate uh, thing about our careers that we depend on other people telling us yes all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I think shifting a little bit of that mindset and becoming more of a creative and saying, well, okay, I'm not going to allow another person to say no to me. But going back to the dark places, I think the biggest thing for me was
Yeah, I was going to say, what neighborhood did you move into when you first moved to LA?
I actually went to Cal State LA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I went to Cal State LA and I was on the dorms living there. So I did have college on the side to kind of like not like distract me from the rejection.
Right, sure.
But it was really tough. And I remember like especially when I was younger, it was really, really tough. And I remember I had a boyfriend back then, and he would tell me, he's like, well, Jearnest, like, like to become a master, you're gonna have to like do it like over 10,000 hours.
Right.
So like you haven't done it enough. And I'm like, I've been doing this since I was 8 years old. What do you mean? You just have to keep going.
Yeah.
Because it just eventually things get easier, and it's all about the mind. So for me, it was after every rejection, it was about becoming stronger. Like my mind, I had to really get to a place where I was okay with everything around me, and being okay with being rejected. And then
that's sort of what they call in athletics, like the champion mindset of saying like it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And when I don't get the result I want, what do I learn and how do I push forward with that new information?
We are athletes. We are.
I'm going to tell people that while I'm eating my third slice of pizza. I'm an athlete.
No, but
Jearnest said so.
we have to have the mindset of an athlete,
Yeah.
because it is about the marathon.
Yeah.
It's not about that one project. It is not about that one job. So what I think that was really what got me later understanding that it was about the process. And that's why I started doing the journey and like hashtag the journey, because I think that people are following the journey. People
Hmm.
are seeing me go through it, go through the yes and the excitement of it all, but also going through the no's.
Well, nobody really shares the nose. I think that would be a very interesting thing to see. Like you see all these great documentaries and stuff that are coming out now. It's like, show me the nose. Like show people what it's like to go through the nose and how different people deal with it, because that is such a big part of earning it. Like, and this is the thing that I think some people have a hard time understanding, is like everyone who's gotten something has earned it. And I had a real problem with this. I'll just share this personal experience. When I got my show, I felt like I didn't earn it. I really felt like there have to be people that have worked harder. There have to be people that like that deserve it more. Like I just don't feel like I've earned this. And my first, the producer and a maker else, like, well, you first of all, you never have to stop earning it. So if you feel that way, bring that to set every day and put that feeling into the work, and the work will be better. And he's like, I could sit here and you could tell me your life story and I'll give you the 30 things that you did that made you earn this, that you don't see or recognize because you're too close to it. And so I think there's two productive things you could do with that. Is one, accept, try to explore why you don't feel like you deserve something. You've earned it when you do get it. And two, if you do feel that way, try to invest it in the fact that, okay, maybe I got this opportunity that a million other people deserved more than me, but what am I going to do with it? And will I make
Exactly.
the most of it? And I think that is a more productive result than feeling guilty. And by the end of the run of the show, we did 3 seasons and 24 episodes. I felt like, boy, did I earn that. Like, whether I felt like I earned it when I got the opportunity, when it was done, I knew I gave 100%. I did more than ever I was ever asked to. And I did everything I could to try to make it continue to be successful, continue to go. I was a team player when I needed to be. I stood up for myself when I needed to. Like, I wouldn't change anything about the way that whole thing happened, even though it ended. And now the next thing, whatever that
Yeah,
is,
well, things
awaits.
end. Things end.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that's
so,
also a beautiful thing to realize. And that's why I think I'm also very grateful about the present. Because I'm always I'm very philosophical, and like I'm very like I always tell people, I'm like, hey, you have to appreciate everything, you have to appreciate the present. Because the second boom, it's the past.
yeah. Well, and
You know?
it goes by so quickly, and you have to
Everything goes
realize.
by so quickly, and everything is temporary, and you just have to appreciate it in the moment. And I felt that way with Sneakerheads. When I got Sneakerheads, I was like, I had that imposter syndrome where it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's exactly what I felt.
and I'm like, oh, I don't deserve it, I don't deserve it. Like, I was so nervous. And after the fact, now seeing everything, I'm like, I did that. I
And
did
I
that.
don't think, it's interesting because like a lot of times when we watch movies, we'll be like, oh, who else could have played that part? And when you watch Nori, that thought doesn't even come in your head. You don't even think like, oh, what other actress could play that part? You just think like, nope, that's her. That's the character. That's Nori. Like that thought never came into my mind of like, who else would you cast for this? Because it's like it didn't even feel like you were acting. It felt like that's a real person. Like anybody who lives in LA is like, that's a real chick that lives in LA that is like got this
Everyone keeps
hustle
asking
game.
me, like, are you a real sneakerhead? Like, they've been asking me about sneakers. They've been asking me to find them sneakers. Like, I'm like, guys, I'm not Nori. Like,
Yeah.
I don't flip shoes. I'm sorry, I don't flip Snickers. Like,
Right.
no.
Yeah, but that's how authentic, and I think it kind of works because you're still at that stage in your career where you're not so well known that it pulls people out of the character. So I think it served the character to where people are like, "Yo, is that girl like a real, like is she like a real person who runs the
Which I
sneaker
love
culture in
that. I
LA?"
love that. Actually, you
Right.
just mentioned something like I think there's some beauty in not being well known, like being like an A-lister or something, or like someone that's well known, because people buy more into it.
Right.
Once you get more recognized, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go watch Keanu Reeves, you know, or J Lo, you know.
Right.
So there's something to that, but yeah, I'm Nori was a really fun character to play, and yeah, it's crazy what people like. You never know what to expect, and you don't know when you're doing it. You don't like, even when I was doing it, because I got that part 2 days before we started shooting. I was like, am I even doing like? It was that process of like, what am I doing with this character? Am I playing it like, you know, finding the balance of that, because
Yeah,
it's a
like am I
comedy
playing
and
her? Yeah. Am I
it's a
playing her
comedy, so you don't
ratchet?
know.
Am I playing her? Yeah, am I playing her calculated? Am I playing her? Which is actually what I thought was really cool about the character, is that she comes off as somebody who is dictating culture, not participating in it. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? Like,
Yeah.
she seems like somebody who is determining this world of what things are valued at versus playing to it, if that makes sense. And
Yes.
so I thought she had a very sort of like boss vibe to her. And I hate people using buzzwords like, yes, boss, but you very much did execute that role that way, where it was like, no, she's the one running all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see you kind of get brought into the gang is cool, because in a way it seems like, oh, I didn't think that they would be able to get somebody like that interested, but it shows that you know, even the most seasoned and successful hustler has ambitions of doing something bigger and wants to get to that next level and wants to find, like, okay, how do I level up to the next big thing?
Right.
which
Yeah.
was which was cool. And I think
Yeah.
the show was really good. It was like, the thing I love about shows like Sneakerheads is like, it is the right amount of funny, the right amount of heartfelt, the right amount of story. It's like this perfect blend of, it's good at a lot of things. It's not like, it's not only awesome at one part of a show. It just sort of does everything well. The casting is good. The performances are good. The writing is funny. Like, and it just
Yeah.
kind of all works. And those are the kind of shows, like, you hate to say this, because a lot of times it sounds like it's not a compliment, but it's like, that's a show that could run for 20 seasons. Do you know what I mean? Like, and people
I
used to
think
say that
so
about,
too. I think
people
so
say that
too.
about like old sitcoms, and like, oh, that ran forever and it was garbage. But it's like, no, it ran forever because it worked on a lot of levels.
Exactly. I keep, you know, when I watched it at first, I was like, because I'm very critical about my work,
Yeah,
and
and
then
you and
when
we
I
all
watch
see
it,
the things in ourselves that we hate. Like, so we're like, oh,
and I was
I
like,
did this.
oh, I was like, oh, are people are gonna understand this? Like, you know, and then eventually I watched it again with my grandparents, and I was like, oh my God, this could be like The Office.
Yeah,
Or like, you know, something where it's like, it's something that you watch and watch and watch, and you can always write more. You can always find a new adventure. You can
right.
always, you know, it can become something that can keep going and
Well, and
growing
that
and it's
collector
exploring.
culture, yeah, that collector culture is so deep. Like, it's
Yeah.
not just shoes, it's so many things. And
It's so many.
so,
I just want to stop you really quick. I just want to make sure, because I have like 1% and I don't want it to die.
okay.
Let me see if I can find a charger really quick.
Yeah, you're
'Cause
good.
I'm like, no. And I forgot to bring my charger with me. Let me see if I can find a charger. Look, you're going dark. Here, let me see if I can find a really
That's all
quick
right. We're
charger.
breaking the fourth wall. People are
Yes,
seeing
we
our
are.
surroundings.
Sorry, but we need to do this. Let
I
me. I'm like, wait, where's my charger? Give me 1 second. Hey guys, do you have a charger really quick? No? Oh my God, we forgot the charger. Okay, well, we might have to end it here, or I can get connected again in my iPad.
Either
Let me.
way is fine. Either way is good. It's been great so far.
Sorry, I was not expecting my whole phone like decided to. The battery is so bad.
It's always a good thing when you burn up the phone battery
I
on a
know.
podcast.
That's good, right? You're right.
Is there anything that you want to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, just keep watching Sneakerheads. It's been a true pleasure talking to you, Josh. I feel like I don't want this to end at all. I want to just keep talking to you.
Well, the beauty of these things is that we can always do them again.
Yeah, let's do it again, because I think
Yeah.
that there's so much that we can still talk about. But right now, people can just go to Sneakerheads on Netflix, Little America on Apple TV, Kukui the Boogeyman on Hulu, Sci-Fi, NBC.com, and hopefully raise your hand. It's going to be on my social media. So if you can say, my social media is at Jearnest Corchado on Instagram, and you'll be posting, you'll be updated about my work there.
Oh, that's cool. Well, we'll make sure everybody follows along. Thank you again.
Thank you,
And
Josh.
and
I'm so sorry
yeah,
that we ended like this.
no, that's okay. And hang on, I'll end our broadcast, but hang on a minute, and I will
Okay.
get some info from you before we go.